Welcome to Immortality. Transcending the limits and concerns of mere mortals, your character has now entered the realm of ultimate power. Your dynast, paragon, polymath, or hero is now one of a handful in the entire history of the human and demi-human people to earn this exalted privilege. Your character can now explore new worlds and revisit the old. A new home and friends await, and much work lies ahead. Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker, and welcome back to my channel. It's time to leave the prime plane behind, just for a while, and discover the powers of the Immortals, via a look at the 5th and final box set of the BECMI Dungeons and Dragons edition, as part of my exploration through these rules. Before I start, I just want to caveat some of the information I'll be discussing here. As you may know, this video is part of a series specifically looking into the BECMI box sets. The reason I mention this is that the rules for playing an Immortal were altered considerably with the release of a future product called Wrath of the Immortals in 1992, written by Aaron Alston. This was yet another box set which featured a book called Codex of the Immortals, which could be viewed as the information about Immortals that was missing from the Rules Cyclopedia, released in 1991, which was an amalgamation of the first 4 box sets only. What I wanted to do with this video is stick strictly to the Immortal Rules box set, so as not to confuse you by jumping from one product to another, informing you of one thing here and telling you how it was updated over there. I think Wrath of the Immortals, as well as the Rules Cyclopedia, deserve a video of their own. So I'll capture the changes and updates then, and stay focused on the Immortal box set for now. The Immortal Rules, commonly referred to as the Gold box set, was written by Frank Mentzer and published in 1986. The Immortal Rules supported play beyond the maximum mortal level of 36, once a character had successfully attained immortality. The rules themselves were very different to what players and dungeon masters had been used to, which for some was a step too far, causing the Immortal Rules to be the least played and least explored of the box sets. The set itself was adorned by a 5th and final Elmore dragon to grace the cover of the BECMI series, set in a landscape perhaps more befitting of science fiction, with a space-age castle in the background and planets or moons hanging in the sky. It was a clear indication that this product was going to be very different to what we'd come to expect from a Dungeons and Dragons game. The box set comprised of the traditional 2 books, The Player's Guide to Immortals, made up of the familiar 32-page format, and the DM's Guide to Immortals, which came in at 52 pages. Now traditionally, I have gone through the player section and the DM section and talked about what's been added to the BECMI game. However, the Immortal Rules deviate too far from the standard rules for that to work here, so I thought the best way to present these changes is by going through the Immortals character sheet for a character that has just attained immortality. It has meant this video turning into more of a tutorial than my other videos, but I think I would have done you a disservice if I just skirted around the subject matter. So here is the character sheet found in the DM's book, and we're going to fill it in as we go along. And we'll assume that Rodney of Peckham, who I introduced you to in my video about the companion rules, link on the screen, has somehow attained immortality. I'll intersperse my videos with explanations of various rules and commentary, so that context may be achieved. The objective here is to build an understanding of the rules through completing the character sheet. So without further ado, let's examine what being an immortal means for your character. The rules state that on attaining immortality, your character's spirit left the mortal world, and its mind and body were changed into immortal power. Your character can now assume any form required, and can even be in a number of places at once. Your character's memories and personality remain the same, but they are now concerned with the machinations of the multiverse, through a link to their sphere of power, creating many things, including entire planes of existence. Since I've mentioned the subject of an immortal's form, one of the new rules we need to be aware of at this point is the concept of form. An immortal can have one of 3 main forms, which determines the immortal's current armor class, saving throws, and some other details, like movement. First there is the incorporeal form, which is basically insubstantial and made of pure power. In this form, an immortal cannot make physical attacks, and is immune to most attack types, including all magic, and can conduct limited actions. They are unable to use spells and have no sense of smell, taste, or touch, although they can sense light energy and sound. Astoundingly, an incorporeal immortal can move up to 24 miles around, or 8,640 miles per hour, even through objects and magical effects. The second type of form is called the normal form, of which an immortal might have a variety. These are durable but mortal shells, and have an armor class value dependent on how much power the immortal has invested in it. They may be affected by spells, although still immune to mortal mind attacks. Immortals in normal form can communicate normally, and their senses include a greater scope of vision, including X-ray and other radiation frequencies. They may fly and assume gaseous form at will, and may use a new attack form for immortals called a punch attack, which is essentially an unarmed attack that is more powerful than any mortal weapon. Finally, they can create any spell effect using something called power points whilst in this form, and may also save for half damage from physical attacks. The third form is the mortal form, which is automatically assumed when visiting the prime plane, although the immortal can assume any age of this form. The mortal form's characteristics, apart from intelligence or wisdom, return to pre-immortal values, which may be altered for age. The limits and flaws of the mortal form return to the character, and the mortal uses their mortal saving throws, although they remain immune to mortal mind attacks. There is a bit more on forms in the Player's Guide to Immortals book, which I'll get to later in the video. For now though, this should be enough to allow us to understand the filling out of Rodney's character sheet. So Rodney has attained immortality. When he attained immortality, he was a 36th level fighter, so let's put that on the sheet here. He has also chosen the sphere of matter to concern himself with, within the multiverse. We'll also put his alignment down, which is lawful. Now we come to the first real difference from the classic D&D rules. Immortals have hit dice, but not in exactly the same way we're used to. Immortals progress through a series of ranks and levels, which determine the number of hit dice they have, as shown on this rank advancement chart. I'll refer back to this quite a bit as I move through these rules. An immortal does not roll for their hit points, receiving a standard amount based on their hit dice, which is also a measure of their power should it be needed. Rodney begins immortality as an initiate, and as you can see here, has 15 hit dice and 75 hit points. So we can return to the character sheet and go ahead and add Rodney's hit dice and hit points there. Now let's look at a critical element of the immortal character, their power points. Power points are the immortal's version of experience points, but they are also a stat that can be expended, both temporarily or permanently, based on the outcome you desire. As you can see on the rank advancement chart, there is no power point listing for the initiate, because this is determined by the experience points the character had before becoming immortal. We are told that one power point is the equivalent of 10,000 experience points, and to determine an initiate's starting XP, we must divide their XP total by 10,000. Let's assume Rodney had the minimum to attain 36th level as a fighter, meaning he had 3,480,000 experience points. If we divide this number by 10,000, we can work out that Rodney starts his immortal existence off with 348 power points. Let's record that on the sheet. As you can see, there is a section for current power points, as this score can fluctuate during the game due to activities and combat. Looking across the rank advancement chart once more, we can see a column labelled AM. This stands for anti-magic, and is a percentage chance for an immortal's physical form to be resistant to magical effects, which increases as the immortal rises in rank. This can be voluntarily dropped by the immortal, so that they may receive a magical effect that is beneficial. But otherwise, magic must get past an immortal's anti-magic resistance to have any chance of affecting it. We can see that an initiate's anti-magic rating is 50%, so we'll enter that here. Let's skip down the sheet a bit and now enter Rodney's ability scores. These are exactly the same as they were when he attained immortality, so we'll just record them here. Now let's look at the modifiers. Each one has the same effect as normal for the mortal form. However, an additional modifier effect is gained for each ability when becoming immortal. I'll only list those here, as I'll assume you're familiar with the standard effects of the ability scores in the D&D game. For strength, the normal modifier for the score, in this case +2 for 16, is used to calculate the number of d6 damage an immortal may do with their punch attack. For intelligence, the modifier applies to the number of projects the immortal can handle simultaneously. In other words, the number of places the immortal can be at once through the use of avatars. I'll cover this a bit later. For wisdom, the modifier no longer affects saving throws when not in mortal form. The number now shows the maximum number of creatures they might affect with their aura ability, which is a form of attack immortals can use. Clearly, Rodney needs to develop this. For dexterity, there is no modifier applied to the immortal's armor class when not in mortal form. The dexterity bonus may be applied in some unarmed combat situations. For constitution, there is no bonus to hit points when not in mortal form. The modifier is used to delay the effect of poisons by that number of rounds. For charisma, the modifier is used as a saving throw modifier for those an immortal affects with their aura. If Rodney was able to use his aura, his enemies could make their save unmodified. Returning to the character sheet, we'll leave the current score field blank for now, but it's here because ability scores can be attacked in immortal combat. Rodney is not thinking of flexing his muscle quite yet, but he may want to in the future. Now let's complete the greater and lesser talent sections. Each sphere favours certain abilities, as shown in this table. Greater and lesser talent scores are used for checks which don't seem to sit with any one ability score at the DM's discretion. As mentioned earlier, Rodney serves the sphere of matter, and according to this table, that means his greater talent abilities are strength, constitution, and dexterity. These are added together, making 43, and recorded on the character sheet. Rodney's lesser talent abilities are wisdom, charisma, and intelligence, and these are also added together, making 29, and recorded onto the character sheet. Looking good. At this point, I'm not going to record the modifier for these scores. We need to go into ability scores a bit deeper for a moment, because, of course, in the Immortal Rules, they can be improved, meaning modifiers can get quite high. In the Immortal Rules, an ability score can be increased to a maximum of 100, with ability checks being conducted on a D100. The modifier to each ability score is listed as shown, with charisma having its separate table. Raising an ability score costs a number of power points dependent on your current rank, as shown in this table on the right. I could find no reference to ability score improvements at initiate level, so we'll assume that improvements can only be made once the temporal rank has been achieved, gained when an initiate's power points reach 500. Each ability score requires a permanent expenditure of power points, but an immortal's total power points are not allowed to fall below the minimum required for their rank. You can also see here that each rank may also achieve a maximum ability score, with the next rank required to be able to improve further. Additionally, an immortal's ability scores that make up their greater talent must all be at the maximum for their rank before they are allowed to progress to the next rank, meaning advancement is more than just obtaining power points. So, returning to the rank advancement table for a moment, you can see here the greater talent scores required to advance to each rank. Right, still with me? Let's go back to Rodney and enter the greater and lesser talent modifiers now that these hopefully make more sense to you. Let's just do one more thing to make it clear which form of Rodney all this applies to, and put a check next to normal form. That is, the physical form Rodney will take when travelling the multiverse beyond the prime plane. The statistics opposite are just there to be another record of abilities when in another form. It is strongly advised to keep your mortal character sheet for when you return to the prime plane, just so that original scores can be referred to. So let's return up the character sheet and fill in the missing information there. We are now able to complete the information for aura, which we learned was based off wisdom and charisma modifiers. The number of creatures affected by Rodney's aura is 0, and the save modifier, should anyone be affected by Rodney's aura, is also 0. But we now know that these can be improved through Rodney's adventures in the multiverse. Let's move across to hit rolls. which uses the descending armor class descriptors here, but when looking at the hit roll charts in the book, the negative symbol has been omitted. I don't know if TSR was running out of ink at the time, but it seems like an odd choice of presentation after getting used to negative armor class all the way through the system. The number needed to hit is determined by the Immortals hit dice, and we know that Rodney has a hit dice of 15. We also know he has a +2 to hit based on his strength score, so we'll transfer the numbers over to his sheet with that modifier accounted for. Here. I'm not going to add the details for mortal to hit rolls, as you should already have that recorded on the mortal character sheet. Right, let's get moving on to saving throws. Again, I'm going to ignore the mortal saving throws and concentrate on 4 new saving throws introduced in the Immortal Rules, which are only relevant when not in mortal form. These are Power Drain, for when a non-spell effect would reduce an Immortal's power points, Magic Spell, for when a spell could potentially affect any part of the Immortal except the mind, after anti-magic has been checked of course, Physical Blow, to resist the impact of an attack, potentially halving the damage, and Mental Blow, for attacks against the Immortal's mind. Looking at the saving throws table, I can see what the saving throw scores are for an initiate, and record those scores on Rodney's character sheet. I'm not sure why they're ordered differently on the sheet, perhaps a printing error, so I had to be careful not to get these mixed up. Okay, so let's go and fill in the armor class score. An initiate starts with an armor class of 0, which might be subject to modifiers, but never due to ability scores. An Immortal may improve their armor class at a cost of 100 power points for every 1 unit of armor class, to a maximum of -20. It's of course up to the player whether or not they want to invest their power points in this way. Rodney has an armor class of 0 to start, so let's record it here. Below this section we have the attacks area, which would typically be the physical attacks of the Immortal, so we'll put Rodney's punch attack here. But let's move away from the sheet for a moment, because Immortals gain a number of new attack types that need to be explained. These are Aura, Physical, Magical, Power, and Ability Score. I have detailed these in the table below, and I invite you to pause the video to become more familiar with them. More detail on the resolution of these attack types is given in the rules, but clearly there are many options available to Immortals depending on where they are in the multiverse and who they are fighting. So let's go to the bottom of the character sheet now and finish completing it. The movement rate for Rodney's normal form now includes flying and gaseous speeds, relating to what is called universal movement. Also, Immortals may push their movement by an extra 30 feet per turn or 10 foot per round, so taking these into account, I shall enter Rodney's movement speeds onto the sheet, with the special slot relating to his gaseous form. I'm going to leave this section on difficulty modifiers. This relates to specific tasks an Immortal may undertake using an ability check. The modifiers available for these checks are much more fluid than what this area of the character sheet suggests, being influenced by many factors. Therefore, it probably isn't helpful to state strict modifiers here when they might quickly be changed. Right, so on to the magic factor circle. Immortals may create any mortal spell by expending power points, which is related to the spell type and the sphere of the Immortal producing it. All spells in the BECMI game are listed in the DM's Guide to Immortals, listed by association with the sphere and then a cost in power points to create. As you may already know, the spheres interact in a way of dominance. Matter over thought, thought over time, time over energy, and energy over matter. Therefore, any spell from a sphere that dominates an Immortal's own is most expensive to recreate. This table shows the factor to be applied to the normal PowerPoint cost for a spell. For example, if Rodney wanted to cast Hold Person, the rules tell me it has a cost of 4 power points and is associated with the sphere of time. Checking this table, I can see that I must multiply these 4 power points by a factor of 4, totaling 16. You can see how the other spells listed here might cost differently for differing spheres also. Pause the video if you wish to study this further. So with that now known, we can apply the factors for Rodney being of the sphere of matter to his character sheet. As so. Finally, we get to recovery rates. Immortals regenerate their hit points, ability scores, and power points, and the rate of this regeneration is dependent on where they are in the multiverse and its bias towards their own sphere of power. The astral, ethereal, and prime planes are always neutral, so do not need to be noted here. The rate of regeneration is at 1 point per round on a friendly plane, 1 point per turn if on a neutral plane, and 1 point per day on a hostile plane. Checking the rules, I see that because Rodney is from the sphere of matter, his friendly planes are those associated with earth and matter. His neutral planes are those associated with fire, air, energy, and thought, and his hostile planes are water and time. We'll record these on the sheet. And there we have our completed character sheet. Well, sort of. The astute of you will notice that we have not addressed the area labelled True Name. That is because this is a mechanic that comes into play once an initiate rises to the rank of temporal and beyond. True names are an abstract mechanic that are linked to the life force of an immortal. If knowledge of an immortal's true name is known, their entire existence is at risk. A new true name is obtained every time an immortal goes up in rank, and all of an immortal's true names must be known to have total power over them. I'm not sure how I feel about this mechanic. I've come across this concept in film and literature, but here it feels kind of forced. I mean, who's going to give their true names to anyone? And how can a DM rule that a player's true name has somehow been obtained by an enemy? That just wouldn't be cricket, would it? But anyway, Rodney is currently an initiate, so I don't have to worry about that right now. And just to remind you again about advancement, by referring you back to the table again, a certain number of power points must be achieved, plus the maximum ability score achieved in each of the greater talent abilities before progress can be made. Now if I just draw your attention to the far right column of this table, this refers to population, meaning a maximum number of immortals that may exist at that rank. Advancement, therefore, also requires the defeat of an existing immortal of that rank who you wish to supplant, usually through a competition which is referred to in the rules as the Immortals Olympics. In my opinion, this is overkill, and an unnecessary step. In addition, I'm not sure how important it is to have a ceiling on the number of immortals in existence. I mean, it's not like you're ever going to get round to them all, so I'd ignore this entirely. Now that we've gone through the character sheet to help you understand these rules, what else is there that you should know? Well, the Player's Guide to Immortals has information on how to build and construct your own home plane, which is the only part of the universe on which your immortal may be permanently destroyed. Construction comes at a cost of power points, but when a plane is made, you can effectively run it in a similar way to Dominions, as described in the companion rules. The Player's Guide ends by going into much more detail on the construction of forms, which can be many shapes and sizes. You may wish to fly around the multiverse as a dragon, or look intimidating and demonic. It's completely up to you, and the rules are there for you to take advantage of. However, it's worth mentioning the concept of avatars, as it is through this mechanism that an immortal may be in a number of places at once. Basically, an immortal can use power points to create any number of forms, limited by the power points they have available. An immortal can deposit a fraction of their life force, the minimum being 5%, into any number of avatars up to the maximum number of projects allowed by their intelligence score. So for Rodney, that is currently 0. If Rodney was able to put 5% of his life force into one avatar, that would have 3 hit points, leaving his main form with 72. All avatars are aware of each other at all times, even if on different planes of existence, allowing for instant communication. An immortal may recall their life force from an avatar at any time. If the avatar is anywhere other than on the immortal's home plane, it dies. I love this mechanic. It really plays into the ability of immortals to know what's going on in multiple places and exert their power. This could make for wonderful campaigns if explored well. So after all that, that's it for the Player's Guide for Immortals. It's now time to turn to the DM's Guide for Immortals, which really acts as a support reference for running an Immortal campaign. The first half of the book informs us of how the multiverse works, including details for dimensions that perhaps are not reflected in any other version of the D&D game, such as the Dimension of Nightmares. In addition, we are introduced to the concept of the Old Ones, being those that came before the Immortals, that exist beyond the barrier called the Dimensional Vortex, where many curious Immortals have sought answers and been lost. Here we are offered a further element to the game, where those players who have attained the maximum Immortal rank of full Hierarch may rid themselves of immortality and return to the Prime Plane as a first level mortal. By adventuring to high level again, and once again obtaining immortality and becoming a full Hierarch, again, they may petition the Old Ones to join their ranks in the dimensions beyond comprehension. Well, if you have the time, you go for it. Otherwise, the DM's Guide to Immortals offers suggestions for how to develop an Immortal campaign. What is there for an Immortal to do anyway? Well, as it turns out, quite a bit, and a good DM will have their imaginations stimulated. The second half of this book details 23 pages of creatures and monsters that the DM can use to great effect, including stats for demons such as Orcus and Demogorgon, and strange extra-dimensional creatures like the Drayden, a floating space brain thing. All in all, once you get past learning a bunch of new rules and expanding your view of the game, the Immortal Rules can actually be quite rewarding. What seemed like a step too far, both in scope and in effort for player groups, actually can be a worthwhile gaming endeavour. In fact, I would suggest that the expanding element of the game is required to change your perception of your character's place in the world, or perhaps the multiverse. A parody of how your character's perception changed when they left their mortal coil to take up their seat amongst the Immortals. If you're looking for a version of D&D within a backdrop of multiple planes and dimensions and dark secrets and extra-planar dominions, then this is it. But I must be clear, the Immortal Rules are not for everyone, and that's okay. It's an option, perhaps an indulgent one, but one that is there nonetheless. Well, that's it for the box sets. What I thought was going to be an easy endeavour turned out to get harder as we got to the Companion, Master and Immortal Rules. I put this down to the wealth of options available that go beyond the classic perception of what a D&D game is. Those final 3 sets really do offer options that just don't exist anywhere else in official published D&D material, and I think that there are many players out there that would benefit from the knowledge of their existence, so that they may be utilised in modern games, if not in their original old-school context. Modern D&D seems to concern itself with only the climb to level 20 and not much else, and I suspect this is something to do with costs of creativity versus what's popular. But in my opinion, the hobby has suffered through not exploring the wonderful expansions that BECMI brought to D&D, and that's a shame. I just hope my videos help in some way to raise awareness of what was, in my opinion, the greatest edition of Dungeons and Dragons ever published. Thank you for watching this video and getting this far. I really hope you've enjoyed it. It was pretty hard to make. If you think I deserve it, please consider buying me a coffee, link on the screen. Otherwise, a simple like and subscribe will do. I'll still hang around. I'm BECMI Berserker, and I hope to see you back here soon as I explore more of the BECMI back catalogue. Take care.